Welcome back, podcast audience, to another episode of the MC Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Crabtree. Thanks for having me, I guess. I'm joined by, Kyle Vosburgh. What's your title? Give me your title here.
Product portfolio manager is my
sounds
running
awesome.
title.
He picks the hybrids and, basically you bring the hybrids from development into commercialization.
Yep.
You are the bridge from research to selling.
Correct. Yep.
Kyle's been on the podcast. If you watched us previously over the years, Kyle's been on several times. I'm glad to have you back.
Thanks.
How about we do this? How about you sit there a little more permanently?
Fine by me.
It'll be fun. So this is this will be the fourth podcast we've done from lockdown, quarantine, shelter in place, stay home, whatever you want to call it, however you want to slice it. Yep. How have you been keeping yourself during this stay at home time?
Pretty good.
Clearly you're keeping your beard tight.
Yeah. Pretty good. Very proactive.
If you're listening to this on the audio version and you're not watching with video, Kyle looks right about now like somebody that like a true life Netflix series would be about.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like if you were like asked questions post conviction.
Yeah. Yes.
Like you've been convicted, you've served time in the state penitentiary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Post mugshot.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's been good. It's been definitely productive. I think it's taught us how to actively communicate without being in the office. Which allows communication whenever, it seems like.
The hours of operation have broadened
Thank you,
a little
Microsoft Teams, for that.
Yeah.
But it has been really productive, honestly. It's totally normal for us.
One of the things I think Scott and I talked about on a different episode, I think one of the things that I've learned is that one of the things that this time has given me is more time with my family, less busyness, less... like even when you're spending time with your family and things are busy, you're going from here to there to this kid's thing to that kid's thing to whatever event, but to just spend time hanging out at home when the biggest event of the night is what we're going to eat for dinner
And watching
usually
Netflix.
What I'm putting on my Traeger grill and what brutal kids movie my kid's going to put on after dinner.
Right, exactly.
So lots of good that's come from it as well as obviously the bad. We are going to... So all these podcasts right now have been kind of topical. Right now, the topic of the day, topic du jour, if you will, is planning populations and flex genetics. Are you qualified to talk about planning populations and flex genetics?
No.
More qualified than Aaron behind the camera?
Doubtful. No.
I'll say yes.
Yes to both.
So we talk about planting populations. It's that time of year right now where some guys are planting in certain parts of the country, and if they're not planting now, they're going to be doing it really soon. When you're looking at what planting population you're going to plant right now, broad strokes, just generally speaking, what is kind of the industry standard across the board for planting populations?
Yeah, I would say for a standard, you're looking at anywhere from, now this is from a 30-inch row perspective, 32 to 34,000. It seems like there's an even ground there that most guys fall somewhere into that. I mean, I think you could push yourself to 36 if you wanted to. But if I was talking just industry standard, 30-inch rows, that's kind of the average. Now,
I know in recent years, we've seen some of those numbers climb up. What are some of the more extreme situations on the high end? I've heard some big numbers in the past, but what are some guys pushing to on the extreme end, and what would be the justification for that?
So as the market moved towards what we consider more fixed year genetics, which is basically a plant's ability to, no matter what the planting population, as long as soil nutrients and the environment is correct, then you can get typically the same size ear on every single plant. I've been to CCA meetings as extreme as in the 50s, 50,000 plants per acre. But really anywhere, what I consider high population, 42 to 48. Anything that falls in that 40,000 plants per acre is fairly high population.
And when we're looking at kind of a historical view, over the last 20 years, last 30 years, is that trend gone up? Are we seeing populations in general trending up, or has it kind of stayed the same or leveled, even gone down?
I think it's fluctuated. I really don't think that there has been a big trend towards moving up. I think it has become more common and we're hearing more about it, but I don't see it as an actual trend.
So maybe not trending up, but you just hear more stories of just those
Right.
odds and end guys that are
It's
doing
more
the
vocal
extremes.
than it was
Okay.
before.
You mentioned determinate ear versus flex ear. So big topic of today is those flex genetics, those determinate
Right.
genetics. Maybe before we do anything else, let's just define those. So what is the purpose of a determinate genetic and what is the purpose of flex genetics?
Yep. So the purpose of a fixed genetic is, like I said, if the environment, the nutrient package, and all of the boxes are checked correctly, then each and every plant within that population should create the same size ear. So you're going to get basically a relative idea of where you're going to be at yield wise based on the population that you believe that soil structure can handle. Flex ear genetics are a little bit different. It allows you to kind of associate population with the overall size of the ear. So as you typically in flex genetics, as long as the environment and the nutrient packages are right, the more you back off the population, the more that ear can flex itself to its true potential. And now everything that we look for in a master's choice bag is going to be either flex or semi-flex varieties.
And why are we doing that?
Well, one, it allows for a little bit broader range of yield from a silage standpoint. And then also we believe that it only helps with our starch percentages, specifically related to dry matter. So starch is a percentage of dry matter. And we've just found that those genetics tend to work better in a nutritional feeding environment.
So I want to put a pin in the nutrition aspect of this, and we'll get to that in a minute. As you're looking at determinate versus flex, compare the yields. Specifically, it almost seems to go a little bit against conventional wisdom to say I'm going to plant less seeds, but I'm going to get the same yield.
Yeah.
Maybe like what can you expect from a yield perspective?
I mean, it really depends. Like, again, it depends on environment, but your hope is that you'll see relatively similar yields. Now, backing off on population, you obviously need to make sure that hybrid selection and variety type are perfect for you and work well on your ground, but you're hoping that in backing off population, you'll knock on the door of something with maybe a little bit more fixed variety at a higher planting population.
And another factor I wanted to talk about, and I've got my notes here, is if in a year, if you're worried about water, or if you're not on any kind of an irrigation, do the flex hybrid genetics, do they give you a little bit more leeway there, or are they about the same?
They're about the same. I mean, water is water. I still think water is important, and you're going to have it in either one. Now, hopefully, you get a little bit more drought tolerance out of some of your flex varieties, you'd hope. But that's more of a selection thing than it is really, based on flex or semi-flex.
Very cool. We talked about, you kind of started to allude to the nutrition aspect of this a little bit. What is it that we have seen or do see from a nutrition side when you back down populations?
So in the past, we've studied in a relation to fiber digestibility. So what we have found through a couple of years of testing, it was multiple years back to back, was that as we decrease population, fiber digestibility, specifically NDFD30, and other fiber factors started to increase. And so with that belief and understanding is that as you crowd plants, lignin begins to develop, undigestible fiber begins to develop, and it can have a negative impact on your overall forage quality.
And what planting populations are we talking about there? Like, what would be kind of the sweet spot for nutrition?
Typically, I mean, we've got some products all the way down to maybe 24,000, 26,000. There's a couple of things that we recommend. We do tend to find that sweet spot right around the 28 to 30, it seems like. That tends to be the sweet spot for us in a lot of our products. But that's that's going to give you the starch digestibility. You're going to still want to develop a big ear. I mean, you got to remember 65% of your corn silage, we believe 65% in that ballpark of corn silage is the ear in overall weight. So you really want to make sure you put on a big ear and make a big plant. So you want to have both.
So kind of to summarize a lot of what we're talking here, give me a recommendation. What would Master's Choice, for a Master's Choice Flex Hybrid, what would your perfect planting population, obviously there's a lot of factors that go into that, but just kind of generalize, where do you get high enough populations to maximize yield, low enough populations to let that plant flex? Like where are you seeing like that sweet spot where you can plant that hybrid, get really similar yields to a determinate year,
Yeah.
and maximize nutrition at the same time?
Well, I mean, it's going to all start right from the beginning. You're going to want to make sure. I even had a conversation this morning about is your pre-plant program the best for you? Like, which, and by that I mean like, do you no-till because it's what you do in your area, or do you no-till because it's actually what's best for your ground? Just north of us, I mean, everybody does some sort of tillage, right? And you're not going to stop people from tillage. Is that the best program for your ground, or is it not? Or is it just what everybody around you does, and you're going to do the same thing? So understanding your program, understanding your weed control, because that is one part of it. If you're going to plant less plants per acre, you need to understand that there's a possibility of a little bit more sunlight directed towards the ground early on. So you're going to want to make sure you have row shading. But if you have those things covered, if you have a good weed management program, if you have a good overall ground either tillage or non-tillage program, I would pick a hybrid where I could probably be somewhere floating around that 28 to 30,000 plants per acre, and make sure I've got something with good ground cover, good leaf exposure early on. We put it on our tech sheets. Some not so much semi-upright, but maybe maybe more of a horizontal leaf structure. I would pick something with that, and then something that's going to give me a big flexing ear.
When you're talking about flex versus determinant from a silage perspective, do you see more tonnage with one versus the other?
It depends. It really does. I mean, you would want to see a larger tonnage from a less use. You want to lower the amount of seeds planted per acre and hopefully see more tonnage. Now, if I'm using fixed year genetics and I'm doing the right things and I've got the management and I'm throwing it to population. If I've got it, I'm going to make a big pile of silage. Is that going to be the most nutritious? You'd have to look at a test. I mean, you'd have to know. Like, you've got to kind of look at some of those genetics. Typically, you don't seem to find a lot of the softer endosperm genetics out of some of those lines. But if you look close enough, I'm sure that there might be some there. But, from a standpoint, if you are using those type of fixed year genetics, you're probably looking to just make a big pile of corn to feed, right? You're not looking at something that you're, maybe nutrition isn't the top thing you're looking for. You just need a big pile of corn, which is understandable. You can push genetics and you can push them to do that. Now you're going to spend a little bit extra throwing nitrogen to it, which is something we like to do with the flexes. Maybe back off a little bit if you don't need it, and kind of let the ground and the organic matter do its own work. But those are kind of the two options you have.
Very cool. This has been good to kind of get some of these differences between the two and just some information and education out there. Guys are going to be going into the ground with corn soon if they haven't already.
Right.
Shifting gears just a little bit. We got any recommendations for those guys going to the ground? What's your final advice before planters hit the soil?
Don't rush it. This is, I've been having conversations with guys and family members who are getting ready to get around that time. Don't rush it. It's still April. If you are in the ground, good. I'm glad you got in early. Nationally, it doesn't look like we're going to have a really heavily wet spring like we did last year.
So
and
this
I know
is the first planting season in a while where guys are actually pretty confident they can get in the ground.
It is, and it's a blessing. I still think the overnight temps are a little questionable. You want the soil temp to be about 55 degrees. Honestly, the best thing to do is, if you're worried about soil temperature, go out and take a soil temp, or just go out to your field with a shovel. And if it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you dig out with a shovel and put your hand in it, it feels cold. It's probably too cold for corn seed. But I think it's going to turn around quickly. I really do. I think we're going to see some 80-degree temps here in the next couple of weeks, especially here in the Midwest. And I think it's going to be, with all this stuff going on, it's going to be a big blessing to have. I hope it's a bumper crop year. I hope it's a good year for crops. I know the markets really need it. So I just really hope that we have a good turnaround here with our planting seasons.
One of the things that I've kind of said on the record is I think it's just going to feel so good for guys to get out and plant because it's such a normalized thing, right? Like,
right.
So much of everything about our lives, and I know ag's essential and I know these guys are still working, but with all of the unusualness to our schedules and our lives right now, I think getting out and running corn planters will be a therapeutic experience for a lot of guys almost.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, to that point, I mean, everybody's going to be involved this year, right? I mean, kids are home.
Yeah.
Kids aren't at school. Usually they're at school during planting.
All hands on deck.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a good opportunity for everybody to kind of come together and hopefully, you know, I mean, we hope that it'll turn around. Hopefully that there's some sort of market correction when this all goes back to normal. And I think the thing that will help that, I was told not to kick that, and I kicked it anyway.
Yes, continue.
Hopefully a bumper crop year and maybe a little bit of sellable product to the market will help that.
Yeah, that'd be a nice win for people who need a win right now.
Right, exactly.
Well, so far everything's shaping up good. I know that the last several years in the podcast, this time of year, we're talking about flooding and when guys are going to be able to get in, and it's going to be June before corn gets planted. And it's nice to have a year, even with as much negative going on, it's nice to have a year where, so far, knock on wood, I would knock on this table, but I've been told not to as well. I mean, we just talked about that, but it would be nice. It's nice to have a year right now in April where we're talking about people planting corn, and as far as I know, very minimal flooding.
Yeah. Yeah, I would completely agree with that.
Well, Kyle, we did it.
Yep.
Thank you for being here.
No problem.
How's it feel to be back on the podcast?
I'm elated.
All right, podcast audience. This is everything you ever wanted to know about planting population and flex genetics. If there's something we missed and questions you have that we didn't answer, hit us up on social media. We will be happy to answer that. I will give that question to Kyle personally. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and if you're watching and you're interested in this as an audio version, and sometimes there's some audio extras that we do on our podcast that don't have video, you can find all of that on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Google, literally anywhere you get podcasts. We're represented there as the MC Podcast. So check us out. If you're watching this, thank you for doing so already. Give us a rating, review, all that jazz. Help us out. And we'll be back 2 weeks from today, next two Wednesdays with another episode. Sound good?
Good.
All right.